What is up, everybody? This is Adam. Welcome back to Fouled Out. What a week of sports for your boy. Wednesday last week, the Bruins beat the Maple Leafs to go up 2-1 in their first round Eastern Conference series in the NHL. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, the Patriots nailed the draft, in my estimation. I am super excited about what they did. And Matt's going to join me in just a moment to break that down along with everything else from the NFL draft. But then Saturday night, after the draft is over, we come back and the Bruins beat the Leafs again to take a 3-1 lead in that series. This podcast comes out on Tuesday, April 30th. The Bees and Leafs play again tonight with a chance to put it away in Boston. And good God, I hope they do it, because I am going to start having PTSD style flashbacks to what happened to us last season if we go up 3-1 and then lose game 5 in Boston. So fingers crossed for me. I'm in a super good mood going into this podcast after how the draft went this past week for my team and how my hockey team's doing. And the Red Sox are out there Red Soxing it up. You know, they're not horrible, right? That's what we can say about the Red Sox, is that they're not the worst team in the league and they're playing decent baseball here in the early part of the season. So good time for the host of this podcast. Matt is super excited about the Lions draft as well. We're going to bring him on. We're going to break down the NFL draft, do a recap, give some of our favorite picks and classes, and do a little Homer Corner at the end. But before we start, just a reminder that you can reach out to us at fouledoutsports on gmail.com. We really appreciate you guys listening. We would love to hear from you. We had some really fun draft feedback from some of the listeners, so keep that coming. No manifesto from me, because the Patriots did not draft JJ McCarthy at 3. They instead drafted one of my favorite quarterback prospects in this draft, Drake May. I'm just so happy. I'm so excited. So let's go get Matt. Let's talk about the draft. Let's go. Matt is here, fresh off of the 2024 NFL draft. Matt, what the fuck did Atlanta just do?
I mean, it's very clear that Arthur Blank's last name is a representation of the state of his mind.
I'm just going to say this about Arthur Blank. So the Falcons draft Michael Penix 8th overall in the NFL draft. And this has been the big story of the draft. So this is where we're starting, and I'm just diving straight into it. I have no time for shenanigans today. They draft Michael Penix at 8 after signing Kirk Cousins to an $180 million deal this offseason with $100 million guaranteed. When the Falcons got on the clock at 8, we had talked about on the podcast last week and talked about in person that we're like, oh, it's probably going to be an edge rusher, a corner, you know, maybe if they're feeling super spicy, it's like Romo Dunze, who was still there. And Adam Schefter comes on and goes, oh, they're thinking about taking a quarterback here. And I was just like, oh my God, this is the worst reporting I have ever heard in my entire life. There is no way Atlanta is thinking about taking a quarterback. And then they showed the Atlanta Falcons draft room. And Arthur Blank is walking around high-fiving people. And I was like, they just took a fucking quarterback. I know. I 100% knew it. As soon as I saw Arthur Blank, I was like, what is the dumbest thing the Atlanta Falcons can do? And Arthur Blank just had a hand in doing it. So I like Michael Penix. I didn't like him at 8 overall. I feel like we didn't even talk about Michael Penix potentially being a top 10 pick on this podcast. The rationale that's come out for the pick is like, oh, we're trying to do the Green Bay model of drafting where we have an established quarterback. We give the next guy a couple years to develop. If you would have drafted JJ McCarthy, I might have bought that, because I'm like, okay, he might need a couple years. Let him develop in your system. It makes sense. Michael Penix is 24 years old. Best case scenario for the Falcons. Best case. He doesn't take over till he's 26 or 27.
Yep.
Which, like these other guys in the draft, JJ McCarthy, Drake May, maybe not like Bo Nix, Caleb Williams to a degree. By the time that they're 26, 27 years old, they will have been starting for between 3 and 5 years, depending on the starter.
Yeah. I mean,
like they're going to be entering their prime.
And even just the argument of like, oh, we're going to do the Green Bay model. Jordan Love had been in the league for 3 years. And by the time he was a starter, he spent the first 8 to 9 games looking shell-shocked out there. Like, credit where credit is due, he finished the season strong, but he did not look good. From a film standpoint, the first 8 to 9 games. Why? Because he wasn't playing football. You need to be on the field to develop.
This is what I'm saying is best case scenario, you just guaranteed Kirk Cousins $100 million. Like you're not starting this kid for 2 to 3 years because you want Kirk to be good. And this team should be competing for the division and a home playoff game and potentially more, depending on how good you think they're going to be. And they could have had a major piece, not only to help them with their pushes this year and be a better team this year, but you could have had a foundational defensive piece. I mean, this draft set the record with 13 straight offensive players taken. That's the most of any round. And they were the first 13 players taken. You're sitting at 8. You could have any corner you want, any edge rusher you want, anybody in a premium position. You can add to your offense. You can get more protection for Kirk Cousins. There's a billion different ways you could have gone here. You could have even traded it back and got more capital. This was the only way you could have gone that I think people would have just reacted the way they reacted. And there are very few moves in sports that are met with 100% disapproval rating or 100% approval rating for that matter. This move's getting panned everywhere.
Yeah.
I don't think I've literally not seen a single person come out and say this is why I think it was a good pick. The Falcons get a good grade in the draft, which how stupid I think draft grades are, but it's just the point of this happens and it is immediately the dumbest thing that we've seen in a draft in I don't know how long
time.
When did the Raiders draft what's his face? With the 4th overall pick, the kid from Clemson.
Oh, Cleveland
Farrell. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a bad one. I was trying to think back to what other really bad ones.
Even that though, it's okay. Yeah. Wrong player. At least you're drafting a player at a position where you're trying to put them on the field.
The fact that you're supposed to be good this year and not the NFC is that strong, right? The Lions should be good. I think the Bears might be decent. We'll see how Caleb Williams does coming out of the gate. But it's not like the NFC is super duper strong. Couple things break your way, you might be going to an NFC championship at least. And it's you have severe deficiencies on defense. And instead of addressing any of those with high level players like Latu or Kenyon Mitchell or, any of these guys, you do this. And part of me wants to zag on this and be it's going to work because everybody is so against it. And it's like gambling, whenever I see a bet that's 80+% of the money is on one team, I'm oh, maybe that other team's going to cover because the public is never 100% right about these things. But I can't see a single scenario or a single argument where I look at this and go, okay, that was the right decision. Unless Kirk Cousins gets hurt this year, like a severe injury, and like Penix steps in and balls.
Yeah, you can't convince me, because even if you were like dead set on like this is the guy that we want to take, right? Like you can't convince me that like there wasn't a team that like wanted to move up and get Rome before the Bears did, because kind of knew that was his floor.
This is the thing that's so funny about it too, is like they completely fucked the draft.
Yeah.
Like I looked back at it and I was like, man, you and I got a lot of stuff right in this draft. Like go back and listen to the mock from last week, our top 4 picks with the guys from Certified Beef. You know, top 4 picks were a lock, right? We knew the morning of, the odds were like heavy that it was going to be Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Drake May, Marvin Harrison Jr.
And the last one was the only one that could have been iffy.
Yeah, but it was
like,
pretty much
all.
like the morning of, it was pretty much guaranteed from the odds.
Yep.
You made a really good call a few weeks ago that came to fruition, that Joe Alt was going to be the 5th pick. 100% accurate there.
Look,
so
when Jim Harbaugh tells you who he is, believe him.
Yeah.
Like,
so we had like our top 5 was good. You and I made money betting on Joe Alt to go 5th. I think I had it at like plus 475 and you had it at plus like 340, something. 340.
Yeah.
So because I listened to you before you listened to you.
I did.
You made the case. You made the case, and I was like, I'm betting on that tonight because it's a great fucking pick, and it ended up being a good one. I had the JJ McCarthy going over pick 5.5. That was my biggest bet of the weekend. We nailed that. I didn't believe the smoke screens that somebody could potentially pick him at 3. I don't think anybody saw the Penix thing coming, and we're like, okay, the draft boards, it's kind of making sense. Like Malik Neighbors goes 6. JC Latham goes 7 to the Titans, which kind of a surprise that he jumped up, but it's like, okay, Titans taking an offensive lineman. That's kind of expected. Things are just kind of going according to plan for the most part. Atlanta drops an absolute bomb on everyone. And all of a sudden, everybody else is scrambling to catch up because you have like Minnesota sitting there at 11 and they're like, oh shit, we got to move up a pick to try to get JJ McCarthy, who was clearly their guy. And the Broncos at 12 are like, we're sitting here without being able to take a quarterback. There's been 5 quarterbacks selected in the top 11 picks. We have to take QB6 just to get somebody in the door at 12. So now you have 12 straight offensive picks, 6 quarterbacks taken in the top 12 picks. 50% of the top 12 picks are quarterbacks. And all the teams behind them, like once you get out of that top 12, if you're the Raiders, you're like, oh shit, like Brock Bowers, who might be like the 2nd or 3rd best player in this class, like just best overall player, just fell to us. And then teams that are sitting even lower than that are like, well, wait, I'm sorry, which defensive players are still on the board? The Lions just get to draft Tyrion Arnold.
And we even talked about it that night. Like that was the pick that allowed that to happen.
So the pick just cascades all the way down the first round and just leaves so many guys on the board. And it's like all of a sudden Latu's going late and the corners are all going late. And all of these teams kind of sitting at the bottom of the board are getting premium defensive picks that nobody thought were going to be there either. So, you know, as good as we did in the first round, we did not see this avalanche happening, but I don't think anybody did.
Before the draft, like I didn't think it was likely, but it wasn't until like the day before the draft that I thought there was even a chance that those corners were going to slide down to that area of the draft.
I think we had the corners going early. Like I know last week on the mock, I mocked Quinyon Mitchell to the Falcons. I think we had the Colts taking one. Like
I didn't think that Atlanta would go corner personally. I was pretty certain that they were going to take an edge, and clearly they were not going edge. Yeah, I mean, even me thinking like they're probably going in that like 12 to like 18 range, even that proved to be like too bullish.
Atlanta fans are on unaliving watch. I'm stealing Brandon's word from last week because I just keep going back to like best case scenario for this pick is that Cousins gets hurt this year and Penix steps in and leads you to however far you go.
Yeah.
If the best case scenario is that you're a $180 man can't get the job done, it's so
Yeah.
messed up in so many ways. And then, like, if Atlanta fans weren't suffering enough, and I feel bad doing this segment because Atlanta and I were finally cool. There's 28-3, and I made fun of them forever. They fucked me on all my picks last year and then made fun of me. We're fine. We're going into this year. I was like, oh, Kirk Cousins, Big Kirko, Kirky 2 Chains. Atlanta offense is going to be way better. No way nobody else in this division is competing with them. But if it wasn't bad enough for Atlanta fans, they come back in the second round. And like there's still premium talent at the top of the second round. And they say, hold my beer.
Yeah, you gonna pronounce it right?
I am not. Me and the guy announcing the pick are not going to ever get this name right, but they trade up. They go up and give away another pick to take Rook Aurora. Did I do it?
I mean, based on the spelling, it sounds right.
Nailed it. Rook Aurora.
It's probably horribly wrong, but
That's how I talk to my dog. But anyway, so Rook Aurora, the defensive tackle from Clemson, who is like extremely raw and most analysts don't have until like the third round, they go up to grab him. And Atlanta, it's just like for the Atlanta fans who are brave enough to come back the second night, God bless you, because if that was my team, I don't think I would watch football this season. Even though if the season started tomorrow, I would still pick Atlanta to win this division.
It blows my mind, right? Because if your counterpoint to like you could have taken Byron Murphy there, right? If your counterpoint to that was like, oh, well, like we actually had Rook higher on our board and we thought we could get him in the second. It's like, okay, but you also traded up in the second to get him. And even if that's what you were going to do, you could have gotten another piece to play with him. There really isn't an argument that kind of makes you sit and just be like, oh, okay, yeah, I get it. Like, it just...
The credit I will give to Terry Fontenot, the GM for the Falcons, is they draft Rook Aurora, and then immediately after there's a run on defensive tackles. Yeah. Like it's Rook, it's Johnny Newton, Tavondre Sweat, which we'll talk about that later. Fisk is up there, and then you have a little break, but then later in the round it's Mason Smith and Chris Jenkins back to back. Mike Hall goes. So there was a lot of defensive tackles taken in the second round. Listen, we don't know what NFL boards look like. And I want to talk about this generally in just a minute, but like there is potential that someone like Rook could have been higher on NFL boards than public boards.
For sure.
And maybe the Falcons knew something we didn't. But the fact that after they drafted Rook, they showed the Falcons draft room again and Arthur Blank was still fucking in there. I was like, nope. Anytime I see that man, ever since he started dancing on the field during the Super Bowl, immediately before disaster, pictures taken before disaster. I was like, this guy's just not smart. And I know that if he's up there, he was involved and that it was a bad pick. And I know this. One thing I did want to discuss, though, is perceived player value versus actual player value.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll talk about the Patriots draft in a little while, but I'm just going to use this guy as an example. The Patriots take Jalen Polk in the second round. They trade back a couple picks. They get Polk. And Patriots fans are like losing their shit on Reddit. And they're like, oh my God, I can't believe we just reached for this guy when AD Mitchell is there and Troy Franklin is there. Like, and I think that like Troy Franklin is such a good example of this. People think that certain players in the draft have way more value than the NFL does because analysts tell you things. You know, if you think you're smart, you go on PFF and you're like, oh, look at the advanced stats and these PFF guys who made up their own stats.
Yeah, made up their own stats that don't actually tell you anything.
And then you see, like, you play with the mock draft simulator and you see that Troy Franklin is like their number 29 overall prospect on PFF. And you look at like ESPN's big board and they're like top 5 wide receivers available. Number 3 is Troy Franklin. And then the Patriots draft Jalen Polk. And you're like, I cannot believe we drafted Jalen Polk when Troy Franklin was there. And then Troy Franklin doesn't go until the 4th round. And so people, I feel like analysts and just people in general, like grade these drafts and react to these drafts based on mocks they've seen from analysts and like people who do not work in NFL front offices. The NFL told you how they feel about Troy Franklin.
Mm-hmm.
And seemingly the only reason he was even drafted that high is because Bo Nix is on the Broncos and Bo Nix was like, hey, could you guys bring my guy in for me? That's the little behind the scenes rumor from a source that I know. But they tell you how they feel about these guys. Like Brendan Rice was a really good example as well, because people are like, that's Jerry Rice's son. He played at USC with Caleb Williams. He's like a 3rd, 4th round pick. And he didn't go until late in the 7th. So for people that are like, you know, you react in the moment and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe they drafted Jalen Polk over Troy Franklin. The NFL tells you how they feel about these guys. And we shouldn't be like, oh my God, I can't believe Troy Franklin fell to the 4th. How did that happen?
Yeah.
We should actually be looking at last year and saying, oh my God, I can't believe Puka Nacua fell to the 5th. How do we prevent that from happening? And you look at guys who have a similar profile, like Jalen Polk, and maybe that guy's a little bit more valuable this year than you think.
Yeah,
so
Jalen Polk was never making it to the 3rd round.
He actually wasn't supposed to make it out of the 1st, if you believe what Peter Schrager, the guys from NFL today, like people that are closer to NFL teams, if you believe more what they say, a lot of teams had him in the top 30. So I'm just using him as an example, but like, I don't think that we can sit here in the moment and be like, I can't believe that guy fell, or I can't believe that guy got drafted this early.
Yeah.
When we haven't seen them play a snap. Unless that guy's name is Michael Penix, because I can't fucking believe that the Falcons drafted Michael Penix that early. I can't. This is my new Ravens ran the ball 8 times. I can't get over it. I'm never going to get over it. We're going to start talking about NBA again next week. I'm not fucking getting over it, Matt.
We're going to be like screaming obscenities about those 2 subjects in the middle of our top 30s.
Spoiler for next week on the podcast, we're going to look at all the 1st round losers of NBA series, teams that went all in and lost in the 1st round, like the Phoenix Suns, who got swept last night and have $240 million committed for next season. 100 mil over the cap. And
shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah. So we're going to look at like, what does this team do now? What does this team do now? And then we're just going to be like, the Atlanta Falcons, what does this team do now? Because they spent $180 million and a top 10 pick on 2 separate quarterbacks in the same offseason. It's never fucking been done before. I guess my last piece about the Falcons draft, unless you got anything else, is like they desperately need a DB, right? Like we thought they would add DBs at some point.
Yeah.
Drafted a quarterback, traded up for Rook Roro, drafted another running back, never bothered to get a defensive back. In 7 rounds, didn't bother with the position. Just like, no, we're good. We don't need a corner.
Yeah.
Terry Fontenot, did you watch this team last year? Am I the only person who watched the Falcons last year? They needed edge rushers and DBs, and you were in a good spot to get them. God.
Yeah.
So the Penix picks, like we said, cascades things. One team I thought was super affected by the pick was the Denver Broncos. Penix goes 8. Roma Dunze goes to Chicago at 9, which just sets up like Caleb Williams in a nasty receiving core with more Keenan Allen and Roma Dunze. Like, I like that team more and more every day. Shout out to Carlos.
You can like the roster, but it's still the Bears.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, is that it's April 29th. I can like the Bears a lot on April 29th. We'll come back to this in late June and see how I feel then. The Vikings are sitting at 11. And all of a sudden, it's not like, hey, there's 3 quarterbacks on the board, so you can kind of wait. It's like, damn, you want your guy, you got to move up now. So they make a trade to move up from 11 to 10, obviously blocking the Broncos, who tried to go up from 12 to 10. We saw a lot of that in this draft, of teams moving up like 1 spot, 2 spots.
Yeah.
Not necessarily because they're like, oh shit, we got to move to get our guy, but more like, we need to prevent another team from jumping in front of us and grabbing our guy, which we've seen a lot in the past.
Yeah.
So they jump up 1 spot, trade with the Jets. And like, if you're in that position, if you're in the Jets position, that's like super advantageous to move back 1 spot, knowing that these teams are fighting over this quarterback, because you're going to get another pick and I still get my guy. Like, sweet.
Yeah.
So they go up a spot and get JJ McCarthy, which we've talked a ton about JJ McCarthy on this podcast. I do want to say, I think the Vikings are the best landing spot for any quarterback, to be honest. I would rank that above the Bears, even though I think like the Bears and even the Commanders to a degree have decent landing situations. I think the Vikings is really good. So I do think if JJ is going to be successful anywhere, it's going to be in Minnesota. Jets go Oli Fashanu, who we'll talk about in a little bit. But the team I thought was most affected by the Penix pick was the Denver Broncos, who are now sitting there at 12. And like we said before, they're like, oh my God, we have to draft a guy right now. We have to get a quarterback right now. We can't trade back because who knows if Bo Nix is still going to be there. They take the 6th best quarterback, and I know they needed a quarterback. And I know they probably came into this draft and thought like, hey, worst case scenario, we can pick between Nix and Penix. You know, if Nix was really their guy, they probably thought they could get him a little later, maybe move back. Like, but I just think that in the draft, there has to be some point where you look at your board and say, here's what we need and here's what's available. And I can either take the 6th best quarterback, or I can take the best edge rusher, or the best corner, or the best this, or the best, like I could take Brock Bowers, who's one of the best prospects. And instead of picking a guy who could be a foundational piece for you, you're just drafting purely based on need. It was like an 100% need pick. And I understand that in the 2nd and the 3rd round a little bit more than I do drafting 12th overall. And I think I was so stunned by the Penix pick that I missed the next 10. Because every time they made another pick, I just looked at you on my couch and I was like, what did Atlanta just do, Matt? What? So we didn't really talk about this. I don't know how you feel about the Bo Nix pick, but it seems like a desperation grabbed me, and I don't like doing that at 12.
You know, if you're Denver, you have to take Bo Nix. Now, whether or not you take him here or not is where we kind of get into the question. And like, I guess the question comes down to like, are you comfortable daring like Oakland, not Oakland. Wow. Las Vegas, the Raiders, to not take him.
I was gonna say I'm super comfortable daring Oakland to do anything right now.
Yeah, right. Because there weren't a lot of other teams left that were potentially an option to take him. Because you could have gotten a contributing piece and potentially gotten him in the second round. Because it's not like you're like we're drafting in the back of the second round. You know, if you needed to, maybe you could have moved up a little bit earlier in the second round if you really felt like you needed to. But yeah, I mean, it seems like a stretch to me to take him here at 12. Um,
Honestly, Matt, at this point in my life, I think the Falcons are a threat to do just about anything.
that's fair.
You're like, do I pick Bo Nix at 12 or are the Falcons going to trade into like 14 and take Bo Nix as well? I think I have to do it here. Take him before he's gone and sitting
That
on the bench in Atlanta.
that is a very real possibility.
Wild card,
Um,
bitches. I'm surprised I had to say that line.
I'm
What's going on with you? Is Atlanta that much in your head?
yes, they really are. Like it's just like the fuck are we doing here?
This is how much the Atlanta pick has fucked up the draft is that Matt and I have switched roles, and I have to say Matt's lines on this podcast. God damn it, Terry
Yeah,
Fontenot.
I mean,
Fuck Kyle Shanahan.
I think there's something there with putting Bo Nix on Denver. Look, the reality is that it's really hard to evaluate any quarterback coming out of Oregon with the offense that they run. Uh, Exhibit A, Herbert. Bo Nix is a surprisingly good athlete and has a pretty strong arm. And look, Sean Payton's a real fucking asshole. And if there's one quarterback from this class that's going to be able to deal with Sean Payton, it's probably going to be Bo Nix.
I feel like I always have weird takeaways from things sometimes. And looking back at this and seeing the Broncos pick Bo Nix at 12, my first takeaway was that Sean Payton really messed up by taking the Broncos job. So he comes in last season and they have like Russell Wilson, who he immediately hates, and was just looking for an excuse
Which,
to get
to be
Russell
fair,
Wilson out of there.
that is the right conclusion to come to.
Oh yeah, no, that's seemingly it's
Like
immediately correct.
everybody else has come to that conclusion. So if you don't come to that conclusion, there's a problem.
When you pay that much money to get rid of a guy, you know that the dudes in the Seattle locker room were not lying about him. Like
Yeah.
they hated Russell Wilson. So he goes, but you're just left completely quarterbackless. And you're probably thinking like, oh yeah, maybe we get Michael Penix, maybe like JJ McCarthy's there. Like we'll get our guy. We can move around a little bit to get our dude. And you end up being in a spot where you're like, wow, we have to take a quarterback because Sean Payton is getting older, doesn't have that many years to coach left, and he wants to win. And the only way you're winning is if you nail this quarterback pick. And like, was Bo Nix actually their guy? Who knows? We may never know that. But I just keep seeing this misconception, in my opinion, where people are like, Sean Payton developed Drew Brees. He can develop Bo Nix. I'm like, oh, what have we seen in the last 5 years? I'm just going like recent history. You could probably go longer, but what have we seen in the last 5 years that leads you to believe that Sean Payton is still a good coach in the NFL?
Absolutely nothing.
Yeah, I think he's washed and he's desperate to win. And so when you have those two things along with this avalanche that the Atlanta drafting Michael Penix caused, you have to make this pick. And I hate doing anything out of desperation in the NFL draft.
There's the issue here too of like even just the conception that like oh well like Sean Payton developed Drew Brees. he's a quarterback developer. Drew Brees spent his first 5 years in San Diego and wasn't the didn't light the world on fire, but he wasn't like atrocious when he hit free agency. Got to New Orleans and was like immediately good. That's not developing a guy. That's a guy getting into a better situation and just being able to execute it.
Yeah, I do think that Sean Payton deserves some credit for being offensively gifted, calling plays and stuff. But like,
Yeah, yeah.
I was thinking about this the other day. What other coach or player has benefited as much from having one Super Bowl ring or one championship as Sean Payton has? Because without his Super Bowl ring, he's Kyle Shanahan. He's like a really gifted offensive coach who could just never get it done.
Not even. Not even Kyle Shanahan. And you know my grudges against Kyle Shanahan. But like Kyle Shanahan has at least repeatedly gotten to the dance. You know? And a lot of those Saints teams, the vast majority of those Saints teams didn't even get to an NFC championship game.
Yeah, but I think you could argue that a couple times they should have made it to another
Oh,
Super Bowl. I'm
yeah. But
looking at
like,
you, LA Rams.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, you can argue that, but like, okay, when there's not a whole lot of other meat on the bone, it's like, okay, it's kind of a hollow argument. I think that what we've seen from just, you know, watching the interactions or the results of like, hey, like great QB and coach together, and then like we see what it looks like when they split. 9 times out of 10, the quarterback's fine, and then the coach is the one that kind of falls apart, right? And I I am not going to give extra credit to Sean Payton for having been fortunate to have coached Drew Brees.
I was gonna say, don't talk about my boy Bill Belichick like that, Matt. He was awesome on TV the other day. I cannot wait to watch Bill Belichick do more TV. He
Yeah.
actually really was phenomenal on the Pat McAfee draft broadcast, and I will watch anything that he does this season.
He definitely kind of dropped a lot of the persona that he puts on as a coach with the media. He kind of was a little bit more laid back and actually seemed like he was trying to enjoy himself.
He was like telling hilarious stories. He's breaking
Yeah.
down all these prospects. Like he just was an amiable guy. Like the guys on the set were having fun hanging out with him. I was like, dude, this is like show this side more. People are gonna like you and forget about all the cheating. But
No, we're on to Cincinnati.
on to Cincinnati. Back to my original point, though, is like, I don't think that there are very many people who have benefited as much from having one Super Bowl ring as Sean Payton has. And I was kind of making a list in my head. And the more I think about it, the longer the list gets. But Aaron Rodgers is like top of mind. It's
Mhm.
like, think about the difference in perception of Aaron Rodgers with and without the one Super Bowl he won. Brett Favre. And I'm going to name a bunch of people that I don't like, and people are going to think this is sour grapes, but like Tony Dungy, Bill Cowher, Mike Tomlin. I really like this guy. You brought this guy up in the pre-show meeting, Matt Stafford.
Mhm.
The perception on him did a complete 180. He wins one Super Bowl.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, it depends on what camp you were in
yeah,
prior to that, but for sure that the perception switched quite a bit there.
yeah. I mean,
I don't
like
think,
general perception.
yeah, yep.
Speaking of, Sean McVay goes on the
Mm.
list, gets one ring. Um,
I feel like he was getting a lot of excuses even before the Super Bowl.
he was, but imagine where we'd be with Sean McVay right now if he didn't have a championship.
Fair, yeah.
it'd be like, hey, you got your pants pulled down by Bill Belichick and you got spanked in a Super Bowl, and then you came close but no cigar all the other times. So if he doesn't have the one, it's like, okay, boy genius, neato burrito.
Yeah.
Who else? Going to other sports, Dirk Nowitzki, I think is a good one. Dirk Nowitzki. So because Dirk Nowitzki beat the 2011 Miami Heat, he is like one of the most beloved athletes of all time, right? Because he's all of a sudden becomes like the superhero. People forget how many awesome Dallas Mavericks teams completely choked before he won that series. Like, I'm talking losing to the 8 seed Warriors, choked.
Yeah.
I'm talking losing to Dwayne Wade and Shaq, like washed up Shaq on the Miami Heat, choked. Like, Dirk Nowitzki was a massive choker before he won that championship. And we all forget that because we love him. I love him. I love Dirk Nowitzki. This is coming from a guy who loves Nowitzki, but just saying. So, yeah, there's a lot of people out there who your perception is completely different because of one Super Bowl, but I think Sean Payton is like top of that list.
I mean, Doug Peterson.
Yeah,
too.
Doug Peterson's a good one. Dan Quinn. Oh, wait, he lost that one. He lost that Super Bowl. My bad.
Spectacular fashion.
Oh, Mike McCarthy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we could probably go on for a year, but definitely Sean Payton, like winning a Super Bowl and then going on TV. People are just like, this guy, he's amazing. And show me the evidence from the last 5 years that he is. I want to see it. I know he didn't coach one of those years, but I want to see like what at the end of the New Orleans run is like, damn, this guy's good. And it's not all just Drew Brees.
Yeah. Or like, even if you look at the play calling, it's like, okay, well, show me the stuff that he's running that is exceptional that he can do with a lesser quarterback, right? Because when you have a Drew Brees, a Tom Brady, a Peyton Manning, Mahomes, like you can run plays that you can't run with anyone else because you can trust them to get the job done.
I think people will point to 2018 and say, well, Adam, look at 2018. You just said they should have been in the Super Bowl. And I'll respond by saying, I said 5 years. It's 2024.
Not 6.
Not 6. We're not going back 6 years. I said 5. Let's get back to the draft though and talk about we're gonna go positive because I feel like we've been super negative on a lot of people so far. Do things we did like, we'll do some more things we didn't like. And then we'll do Homer Corner, which is also going to be super positive. So we'll go it's like a positivity sandwich. We're gonna go positive, negative, positive. Because we started with so much negative. But I wrote down a couple because I was like, Matt's probably gonna say the same things as me.
Yeah.
So you can go first.
Toss a little credit over to the team over in Washington. The should be fighting Georgia's pay us for the trademark.
For the post-draft special price of $3 million. I'm discounting it from $5 million. You, Washington Commanders, can have the rights to the Fighting George trademark. Just pay us $3 million. Just do it. Just do it. You got it. Just do it.
Yeah. So I mean,
yeah.
Other than paying us, I mean, you should pay us. Because as we know, your players don't actually like the team name Commanders. They even told you that before you chose it, but whatever.
I also don't like the little Wario W they have in the middle of their black helmets. You know what would look really, really sexy right there? George Washington fighting somebody. Put up those dudes. George Washington fighting an apple tree.
Fuck yeah.
George Washington fighting dental hygiene.
Yeah.
George Washington lost that fight.
He was not a fan of dental hygiene.
Yeah, George lost that one.
Many times, over and over again.
Okay, why was the draft class good? Because I have an opposite opinion.
I mean, look at the end of anything past like the third round, honestly, kind of a toss up, right? Um, I know that you are probably hung up on the quarterback decision one way or another. At best, when you pick a quarterback in the first round, you got like 50-50 odds, unless you get like a Caleb Williams. Um, so I'm not really gonna like hammer them on picking Jaden Daniels over your boy Drake May.
JJ McCarthy.
But like they went out and they got a quarterback that has the tools to do what they are going to ask him to do. Now it's up to them to actually develop him, but like they went out and they got the guy. But what they did after that, like they went out and got Johnny Newton in the second round, which obviously I don't know what the medicals look like on that. I'm guessing that's why he was even there. But even with some medical red flags, I think getting him in the second round, pretty big steal. After that, they got one of my guys and Mike Sanders still. Like that's a starting nickel on your defense, like right away. I mean, they got like three guys that can potentially be cornerstones right off the bat for them. That's huge.
Yeah. So this is why I don't love it is, and I could be 100% wrong here. I'm just going to throw that disclaimer out. I'm usually not, but I'm just going to say with the number 2 overall pick, you're like, okay, we're going to pick a quarterback. We need a quarterback. And you didn't pick the best one that you could have picked. I think Drake May is going to be better than Jaden Daniels. And people can be like, well, yeah, you just drafted Jake May. Of course you feel that way. I've been saying this for weeks and months and years that we looked at this draft class 2 years ago and went, holy shit, Caleb Williams and Drake May are in the same draft class. Unbelievable. You need a top 2 pick. And then Marvin Harrison Jr. joins, and we're like, oh my God, this draft class is amazing. And I said, when we stopped playing football, Jaden Daniels was like a late first, maybe an early second round pick. And I said this at the time. You go back and listen to the podcast. I was like, someone is going to draft him super high because I thought at the time he was going to run at the combine and people were going to see the 40 time and just be like, holy shit, that's tall Lamar Jackson.
Yep.
And I'm not saying Jaden Daniels can't be good. I think he can be good if he learns how to throw to the middle of the field, which is kind of a super important skill for an NFL quarterback to have.
Mm-hmm.
And he learns how to not get absolutely annihilated every time he takes off with the ball. But like,
yeah,
my evaluation is just that Drake May has a higher ceiling and is going to be a better quarterback. So,
well, and it's honestly, I think it's going to be hard to really evaluate, like in the end, who was a better prospect because Jaden Daniels is going to play in
for Dan Quinn.
Well, but who's their offensive coordinator?
I can't remember his name. I always forget his name.
It was in my head a minute ago, and now it's going. This is like virtually contagious now.
I cannot believe the Falcons. Can't believe the Falcons drafted Michael Penix at 8. God. Cliff Kingsbury.
Cliff Kingsbury, which like
I wanted to call him Lincoln Riley Sr.
Yeah, honestly, that's a pretty apt comparison.
Yeah, pretty appropriate.
He is almost certainly going to get this second chance in the NFL and show that he's learned nothing. And
well, I do want to see what Cliff Kingsbury can do with a quarterback who actually reads the playbook instead of playing COD all week.
I mean, that's fair, but also I think there were some fundamental issues with his offense in Arizona. So, right. They have to do things differently than he did things there. And
they may just never ask Jaden Daniels to throw over the middle. It's fucking deep balls all the time. So
I mean, between Dotson and McLaurin, like they got two guys who can run slot fades all day. So
yeah, it is true. But I'm well on record saying that I don't
yeah,
have a top 3 grade on Jaden Daniels, and that if Drake May wasn't there at 3, I wanted the Patriots to take Marvin Harrison Jr. instead of him. So that's my take. Johnny Newton in the second. You know, he was ranked higher on a lot of boards. We don't really know like where he was on NFL boards.
yeah.
So, seems like good value there, but also you have more money invested in the interior defensive line position than any other team in the NFL. And now you're taking another one.
Well,
So,
that's another guy that you don't necessarily have to pay when
yeah,
there's
but
an out in the contract.
I'm
Like,
just saying you already spent a ton of money there
yeah,
and you have other needs, but I do like Sanders still. We
yeah.
talked about that. That's a good pick.
I
Uh,
I also don't think that like if you have a strong position group and there's a guy that's the best guy on your board that you just shouldn't take that guy.
for who? For Sanders still?
For Johnny Newton,
No, you do
right?
have a
Like
good position group though. You spent
I
more money
I
there than anybody
I
else.
no, that's what I'm saying is
Oh,
like you don't say like, hey, we're not going to take this cheap talent because we already have like a good expensive group there because there's like that allows you flexibility there.
I guess there might have been other things I would like to see out of them, but
I
Sanders still is a
think
good
I think
pick
there's guys that they're going to in the next couple years probably not be paying because of that. So
yeah, like letting Sweat go to the Bears for a second and then watching him fucking dominate. Uh,
mm, I mean, wildly different play styles.
yeah.
So
Oh no, and I didn't mean him and Johnny Newton. I just mean they're gonna let guys
yeah,
go and just be awesome elsewhere. Uh,
yeah,
Ben Sinnott, the tight end from Kansas State, when that happened, I just kind of looked at you and I was like, "What? Really? Okay,
yeah. I don't know. This wasn't a particularly good tight end draft after Bowers, anyways.
yeah."
But
That's what I'm saying.
again, like anything third, like after the third round is a total coin flip. So I'm just kind of like, eh.
Yeah, well, that's okay. I mean, well, he was
He was a third
pick
round pick,
21 in
right?
the second round. Yeah, he was a late second, but it's
Yeah,
close enough. Yeah, and
yeah.
then the rest of the guys, it's like, okay,
Oh yeah, they moved up for that, didn't they?
yeah, I'm just not like
Yeah,
I'm not lit up by anything after that for them. I will say
yeah.
Javante Jean Baptiste,
Yep.
their 7th round pick. I actually like that one, and it's an all name team. Like Javante Jean Baptiste is a great edge
Yeah.
rusher name. So we'll see. That I just wanted to mention that though, because I wrote down a bunch of things I liked because I thought we were going to have too many of the same. That was one where we differ. But um, I really like what the Rams did.
Yeah. That was another
Fucking
one that I was looking at.
yeah, I figured you'd have that one too. But you lose Aaron Donald to retirement and draft Jared Verse and Braden Fisk, a guy
Hmm.
that I talked about how he had similar combine numbers to Aaron Donald. And when we did the My Guys podcast, Braden Fisk was a My Guy, and Jared Verse was one of your My Guys that we agreed on.
Yeah.
Uh, but Braden Fisk, I was like, listen, I'm not comping him to Aaron Donald until he got drafted by the Rams. Now I'm 100% comping him to Aaron Donald. Braden Fisk is going to be the next Aaron Donald. Book it, Dano. Do it right now. But I like those. I like leading off the draft class with those. Getting Jared Verse, who we thought was the best edge rusher in the draft, and then Braden, literally Aaron Donald Fisk. Great start.
Yeah. I think that was a good move and securing that defensive front so that it doesn't become just a gaping hole for you.
Yeah, I was a little meh on Blake Corum going there, to be honest, in the third, but I'm like, okay, I don't know. I guess
I mean,
Kyron
I
Williams needs a
guess,
break every once in a
yeah,
while.
keep them both fresh.
I do like Cameron Kitchens, though, the safety from Miami.
Yeah. Yeah. So a pick that I liked, in a class that I wasn't super, head over heels for that team, uh, was Mo Kamara in the fifth round for Miami. Um, and I think this was, another one of those situations where like the NFL is telling us, where they really are with this guy. I don't know if they were medicals. I don't know if they were really down on him because he's only 6'1". Um, but like you got a highly productive pass rusher that is explosive and extremely bendy and has displayed a bevy of moves that he can use as a pass rusher in the 5th round. Um, he's probably not going to be a starting edge for you right off the bat, but like if you are getting a rookie that can be a rotational pass rusher for you in the 5th round that can feasibly get you, 6+ sacks, like that's great value, like incredible value there. There are guys every year that are drafted in the 1st round that don't get 6 sacks in their first, 2 years combined. So I
Yeah,
like that pick a lot.
I figured that's another one of your my guys who was actually like the latest my guy drafted. Um,
Yeah.
but I think found a decent home there. A class that I really liked, and this is how you're gonna know that the classes I disliked are not just like picking on teams that I don't like because I'm going to give compliments to a team that I don't like now. I really like what the Pittsburgh Steelers did.
That was gonna be my next one.
Yeah, I knew. I was like Rams and Steelers. I feel like Matt's gonna have like we've just been saying for years and years, like why will Pittsburgh not draft offensive line? Why are they not drafting offensive line? They come in here. Their first pick is number 20. They draft Troy Fatanu, the offensive tackle from Washington. They come back in the 2nd round, pick 219, and draft Zach Frazier, who
He's
is
awesome.
awesome, the center from West
Like,
Virginia. And then in the 4th round, they get Mason McCormick, the guard from South Dakota State, who I know you liked. What do they need? Offensive line. Boom. Here's 3 of them.
yeah, I mean they got three offensive linemen that I like in one draft. So
Yeah. Well, and then I liked Roman Wilson, and I like Roman Wilson. I like Peyton Wilson, and I like even more that they're going to put him with Russell Wilson. Just all the Wilsons. Should have traded for Zach Wilson while they were at it, but
Team
I
Wilson.
I do like Roman Wilson at 320. I told you while you were over the other day that Peyton Wilson was my number 1 linebacker in the draft. For the 6 games that he plays next season, I think he'll be awesome. But I just like I'm like, God, your first 5 picks, I like all of them. And I like what you did overall. So I gotta give props
Yeah.
to the Steelers.
I would love to use it to talk about JPJ, but I feel like that's a little bit of a waste here. How I feel about him is already well documented. So am gonna go with Philly here. Just from the standpoint of look, their defensive backfield was literally the worst in the entire NFL last year. And I watched every single Lions game. So like that's saying a lot. Um
Cooper DeJean is not a safety. He's just a corner who will lock down your number 1. DeJean is CB1. Have you heard that song? It's all over TikTok and
yes.
it's amazing. I showed it
Yes.
to you over the weekend.
I literally watched it with you.
Yes, it was glorious. I had a few White Claws this weekend.
Yes. There were many were had.
People are probably listening to me sing and they're like, okay, first of all, this is fucking awful. But secondly, are you sure you stopped the White Claws over the weekend? Because this tells you how excited I am about the Patriots draft classes. I'm literally like bouncing around and singing on the podcast, and I'm saying all of Matt's lines.
Yeah. So yeah, they obviously as Adam alluded to, they took Cooper DeJean. That was their actually they traded up in the second round to get him. But in addition to that, they got Quinyon Mitchell, which I guess pick your preference. He's either cornerback 1 or cornerback 2 in this draft at 22 in the first round. Uh, like we talked about before, did not see that guy slipping this late. And I mean, in addition to that, like Darius Slay is still there. So like they have someone in that DB room who like has all that experience to learn from, and he's not a guy who like came into the league and like day one was just like killing it. Like he knows the struggle and the grind that it takes to actually like be an effective corner in this league. So like those two guys are set up to for the best possible chance of success, especially with that defensive line that they're playing behind.
Can we ask the real question about the Philadelphia Eagles draft class, though? They took an edge rusher from Houston Christian University, round 3, pick 31, whose name is spelled Jalyx. And I need someone to tell me, is it Jalix or is it Jalix? I don't know. And I refuse to look it up because I'm just going to get it wrong all year. I'm going to be like, that's my boy, Jalix or Jalix.
It could be Jalix.
It could be Jalix. Could be Jalyx. I have no idea how to say it. So I probably got to do some research, but that was because you and I were sitting there
on that.
We were talking about that over the weekend, and I was like, is it Jalix or is it like Jalix? And I don't think I heard it when they picked him, and I missed my opportunity to know.
It's not like they were doing a great job with names. So
no, God, nobody was.
it was the like teenage girl that announced the Lions pick was like by far the most composed person that announced any pick that night.
Xavier Leggett went at the end of the first round, and the guy doing the pick was like, Xavier Leggett. And it was just all downhill from then. Because then, like, we came back the next day, and Rook Ororo is like one of the first guys drafted, and it just was an absolute like. Is this like the Oscars where they don't know who's going to be in the envelope until they open it, and they got to try to like pronounce the name? Or there's not someone backstage who's like, hey, they're taking Rook Ororo. You say it, Ororo.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. And I get like you're talking to 250,000 people because the city of Detroit set a record for all-time draft attendance with 750,000 people. Good God. So I get that it's nerve-wracking, but like, is it just like an assistant or someone that could just tell them like, hey, this is how you say this before they go out on stage would be nice. And also like when you go out on stage, just make the pick. You know, the team was already on the clock for 10 minutes. I don't need to hear from, some washed up kicker who used to play for Philly about a field goal he hit against Dallas like 25 years ago. As I've clearly established earlier in the podcast, we only look at the last 5 years. We will not go 6. You will count to 3, no more, no less. You will not count to 4. You shall not count to 2 unless immediately proceeding to 3. If you know what that's from, you're the target audience for this podcast. The last pick that I liked, and it hurts me to say this, is the Jets taking Oli Fashanu at 11. I just thought they would do something super Jets and be like, we don't need offensive line. Let's take Brock Bowers and get Aaron Rodgers absolutely annihilated last season. And they take who I had as tackle number 2 on my board behind Joe Alt. I liked him more than JC Latham, but that's just me. All right. Picks that we didn't like, things we didn't like. I'll lead off here
All
because
right.
you went first on likes. Uh, the Buffalo Bills trade back twice. They trade a pick to the Kansas City Chiefs and let them get the wide receiver they wanted, and Xavier Worthy, who like apparently that was one of the worst kept secrets in the NFL that Kansas City really wanted him. So they trade back with someone they should hate and give him Xavier Worthy. And then they trade back with Carolina one spot and give them Xavier Leggett. And they do this to draft Keon Coleman with their first pick in the second round. I'm not high on Keon Coleman. I have N'Keal Harry flashbacks when I watch him. And my bigger thing that I told you is more just like, if this team drafts a wide receiver with their first pick, how are they better than last season? They let Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis walk and replace them with Keon Coleman. I will give credit to Keon Coleman because the first thing he said is, "Hey, I'm not Stephon Diggs. Throw that shit up there for me." And anybody that disses Stephon Diggs, I'm a fan of at this point. But I just don't love the strategy of like, hey, there's all these offensive linemen and defensive linemen who could like really help address what has been our Achilles heel for years with Josh Allen as our quarterback. And they're like, no, we're taking Keon Coleman.
I don't think I'm as low on Keon Coleman as you are, although I don't think I want to just line him up and keep him as an X receiver all game. Um,
I just
I
have
don't.
PTS. I just get
Yeah,
PTSD when I watch him. I watch his film
yeah,
and I watch him play quarterback.
and I think he's got more wiggle than your boy did. So,
My boy,
um,
don't you dare call N'Keal Harry my boy.
well,
N'Keal
he
Harry
primarily played for your team, so
N'Keal Harry's scouting report starts with he's a really good blocker at the wide receiver position. If that's the best thing you could say about a wide receiver, he is not a first round pick.
to defend the general idea of what the Bills were trying to do is like, yes, they absolutely needed to trade back and get as many picks as they could. And I'm assuming that when they traded back with Kansas City, they were like, oh, you want Xavier Worthy? Okay, like be my guest, whatever. Um, the problem is that that's the one organization that you don't just say, hey, yeah, take the guy that you want. I question their execution of what they were going for, but the idea that they were going for, I think was right. Now, would I have gone wide receiver number one in the second round? No, not
That's
at
more
all.
that's more my point is you went wide receiver and you went with one I didn't
Yeah,
like. So
right. But like, at that point too, I think you can make the argument, okay, well, we have all these picks. Like, honestly, like, let's just take best player on our board. And if that's the best player on their board, then that's who they should take. But at some point, you kind of have to look at what made your team more successful when it was able to be more successful last year. And that was being a little bit grittier, running the ball. So maybe transitioning your team in that direction a little bit more is probably the better call.
with offensive line. Well, I only wrote down two, so give me one that you didn't like.
I really struggled with the Giants' first pick. And this is not like coming from a place of Malik Neighbors hate. Um, I think he was wide receiver 3. I certainly would not have taken him over Rome. Um, but that is besides the point for me. If you are going to go wide receiver there, you are saying that our passing game needs to get better. By going that route of saying we need to improve our passing game and taking a wide receiver, you are telling all of us that Daniel Jones is a perfectly acceptable starting quarterback in the NFL, and anyone who has watched him knows that is categorically untrue. Like, what are we doing?
I think they told us that when they gave him $40 million a year or whatever insane number
I
they're
mean,
paying him.
even that deal, like it had like some pretty easy outs in it, but it's just like, whoo, we're just rolling through with this one, aren't we? Okay,
Yeah,
cool. And we keep bringing this up. There are no quarterbacks next year. So you're committing to him for the next 2 years.
the thing that I like about Malik Neighbors fitting in with the Giants more than Romo Dunze is like we talked about this is that Malik is like someone who can house like short passes, and I feel
Yeah.
much more confident in Daniel Jones throwing passes within the first 5 yards of the line of scrimmage than I do about him throwing anywhere beyond that. Uh,
I I think if that's what you're relying on, then your thought process is like entirely flawed.
they're like our quarterback is bad, so we have to take a worse wide receiver to because he kind of fits with him better with our bad QB. So, the other pick I really didn't like. I had the Commanders actually written down on here too, but I already gave my spiel on that. The Panthers drafting Jonathan Brooks, the running back, in the second round. I'd like Jonathan Brooks. I think that he's going to be good. I think he could even be good for the Panthers. I just, when you have all of the needs that you have and you're this bad of a team to spend a pick in the second round, like a premium pick on a running back is just no. Just no.
Yeah.
Like as soon as it happened, we both were just like, oh, okay, come, like guys, come on. And this comes from two people who might be drafting him to their dynasty league because we desperately need running backs. But like, I there's just a lot of other dudes there, and you know how I feel about drafting a running back high. Like
Yeah.
my boy Tyler Newman went right after him. Sandra still was there. Zach Frazier. I mean, just guys in premium positions that I think really could have helped.
I mean, it seems like a luxury pick in a situation where like you need to build a little bit more foundation.
It's the Najee Harris pick for Pittsburgh. It's like you
Yeah.
desperately need offensive line and you take a running
Yeah.
back.
Well,
Except you desperately
it's
need a lot
like
of things.
it yeah, sure. Like I would love to always like pick the highest rated player on our board, right? Like there's very strong support now for the Lions having taken Jahmyr Gibbs at 12 last year, right? But there also needs to be an understanding of like what is this going to look like on the field based on the roster that we currently have. And if you're taking a I don't want to call certain positions luxury, but like they definitely rely on other positions more than others. And you don't have the foundation built on your roster to do that, then like it doesn't matter how high the grade on that player is, they aren't going to be able to do that thing. So it just you're kind of like shooting yourself in the foot there with that.
Yeah. Give me one more that you didn't like, and then we'll go to the positivity of Homer Corner.
I don't like Chop Robinson at 21 for Miami. And we see it every fucking year. These guys that are coming into the draft as edge rushers and they like go to the combine and like test out of their mind. And people like even like coming into this season for him saw like how explosive of an athlete he was and we're like, yeah, he's going to be a top 10 pick. And no one ever actually looks at what production he actually puts out. Yeah, 2022 was his highest sack output in his career in 12 games with 5.5 sacks. In 10 games last year, he put up 4 sacks. This is not a guy who gets quarterbacks to the ground, and he is being drafted to be a guy that gets quarterbacks to the ground. And everyone's banking on the athleticism, which is clearly there. Don't get me wrong. But like, you're taking a guy who is not developed at all in what he needs to do. And at least 80% of the time that these guys get drafted high, they don't develop the skills that they need to actually get home consistently.
But how great of a fantasy team name is Judo Chop Robinson with like a little picture of Austin Powers. Judo Chop. So
we've got some better names. There are better names out there.
There are better names out there, but it's a good one. The last part of the draft breakdown here, Homer Corner. So if you're anti-Patriots or anti-Lions, I would just turn the segment off.
If you are, honestly, I don't know why you listen to this podcast.
I would be stunned if there was like a Bills fan who's like, you know what my favorite podcast is that podcast where Adam always talks shit about my team. You guys deserve it. You know,
I just hate listening to this podcast.
They're just Bills fans are masochists. That's why they root for the Bills. They're here for it. They love it.
Fair.
They love it when I say bad things about the Bills. You want to go first or second?
I don't care. It's up to you.
You can go first.
Okay. Well, plain and simple. Lions got the number 1 cornerback in the draft for me, Terry and Arnold. And then they went and drafted one of my guys, Ennis Rakestraw Jr., another cornerback in the 2nd round.
The Lions are just becoming like the My Guys team. I'm 100% convinced that Brad Holmes listens to this podcast and he's like, that Adam guy knows what he's talking about, because it was Jack Campbell and Brian Branch last year, and it's Ennis Rakestraw pretty early this year. So just saying, if he had more seconds, he might have gotten more of my guys.
Yeah, so they not only like address their weakest position in free agency with like a couple of good trades and signings, but like they went out and got like 2 of the top like 5 prospects at that position as well in this draft, and are like sitting in a much better spot there heading into this season. I am not going to sit here and tell you I had any idea who Giovanni Manu was when that name came across the screen. And all I will say is that from the little bit of tape that I have seen clips of since then, you really can't take much of it away based on who he's going against, but that is a gigantic human being who like just lives to like pile drive human beings.
Mama, that's a big man.
Yeah. And I really liked the Sione Vake pick as well, just because like having guys that can play all the special teams roles for you is really valuable, and he can fill in at safety. He can fill in at running back. Like he literally does everything. So, yeah, they got guys that just as long as they're healthy, like they are going to make this team better.
Yeah, I like Sione Vake too. I just like that the Lions were like, the defensive backfield was not great last year. In fact, it was near the bottom of the league. And they're like, we're just going to use our assets that we do have to address that by taking the top corner on the board, one of my top corners who I love. I love that pick. I saw it on my phone before it came up on the TV, and I was like, oh, baby, you're going to love this one. And then Sione Vake has a lot of experience playing out of Utah at a safety position. So
Yeah, I did not see them doubling down at corner. But hey, like that the cards felt just right. So I'll take it.
Yep. I'm going to keep mine as brief as possible. There may be a separate podcast coming on the Patriots offseason, but Patriots draft class gets an A+ from me, which I don't think has ever happened before. They stayed at their picks for the most part. They kind of stayed around, moved up and down a little bit, and took positions of need. Like, this was not a year where we're like, God, we desperately need a wide receiver. And then we trade out of a spot where like someone awesome is taken in order to draft a safety from Division 3 or something. And I love Kyle Duggar, but I'm just saying, I I know everybody we drafted. I like everybody we drafted for the most part. I think you can argue pick values all you want, like I talked about earlier, but I'm not going to listen to any of that nonsense. Absolutely love Drake May. I spent months worried we weren't going to take Drake May, uh, and that we were going to do something stupid. And now I get to sit here with my Mac Jones jersey that my wife nicely duct taped over for me and wrote in Drake May, that I'm wearing backwards so you can see it on camera. They spend the next 4 picks not only getting him weapons, but getting him protection. So, like, the Patriots' needs were offensive line, quarterback, wide receiver. We spend our first 5 picks on quarterback, wide receivers, and offensive line. Very few Patriots drafts in my lifetimes where we've just been like, what are our needs? Let's address them with the top players on our boards at those positions. The Javon Baker pick, love that when I saw that. I was like, oh my God. Not only to double dip on wide receiver, but to get Javon Baker, who I think could be better than Jalen Polk potentially in the 4th round. And looking at these guys like reception perception profiles, like I really like both of them. I'm super excited about Javon Baker and Jalen Polk this season and beyond.
Yeah. I mean, like Jalen Polk was one of my favorite receivers in this class outside of like the really big names. And I think he's a lot closer to Rome than a lot of people think. Different game, but like just in terms of like capacity on the field. And
like I said, he was comp to Puka. Just that kind of same play style where he's like he's going to do the tough catches, the intermediate stuff, and break tackles. He's got strong hands.
Yeah. I mean, another guy he reminds me a lot of is Josh Reynolds.
Yep.
You'd like to see him operate in a little bit bigger capacity, but like we've seen when Josh Reynolds needs to be like the guy who has the big day, he's can carry the load. Javon Baker is another guy that I don't think he quite made it to my honorable mentions for my guys, but he was on my list. Yeah, absolute dude, like real deep threat. Just like he's gonna be a force out there. He's not. He's out there coming for dude souls, and that's what you want in a wide receiver.
The first thing he did when the Patriots drafted him is tweet, "Patriot fans, bring your popcorn. I make catches that will make people in wheelchairs stand up." And like, okay, it's kind of a shitty thing to say, but also like that's the attitude I need in my wide receivers that are fighting on the outside against these corners. I need a dude that's just like irrationally confident out there because we just have not had that in years.
I think if you find that statement offensive, I think you need to like consider what the word hyperbole means and whether or not that's a uniformly bad thing, because I think when it's very clearly hyperbole, you're probably fine.
Yeah. Eminem once said, "I find you offensive for finding me offensive." Seems like it fits in. My one gripe with the Patriots draft class, and I'll do it quickly, is just that I feel like the inexperience of the guys making the pick showed. And you've had one dude in charge of your drafts for 25 seasons, so I totally understand it. But there's a lot of rumors that they wanted Xavier Leggett at the end of the first, and like that was kind of their guy that they were targeting with that second pick. We all knew Carolina wanted him, and Carolina trades into the 32nd spot with the Buffalo Bills. I think it's kind of naive to think that the Buffalo Bills would want to trade with you instead of literally anybody else in the NFL. So you probably could have got up a little earlier.
They clearly prefer to trade with the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yes. but I think you probably needed to jump up like a little earlier, like maybe the Ravens or like someone up there. But I don't know what the offers were, and we don't even know that's 100% true. So we'll throw that out there. The end of the second round, there's a huge run on tackles that the Patriots weren't able to like jump into or jump in front of, and they draft Caden Wallace, who could honestly like could have been their guy the whole time. I don't know that, but just the way it looks to me is like, okay, you wanted these certain things and you weren't experienced enough to know like, hey, this is how this is going to play out and I need to make a move sooner rather than later. But my overall takeaway from this draft is, one, I'm super excited for this draft class. This is the most excited I've been for a Patriots draft class the day after draft day, I think, in my entire life. And two, the Patriots have not announced their general manager yet. I'm just going to throw it out there. Maybe we just let Elliott Wolf cook. Let him cook. Let's see where this goes. I've done a complete 180 on the GM situation after this draft, because I like, my biggest worry with the GM thing was that they were going to fuck this up, and they didn't. And they get an A+ from me, which my dad was like, who stole my son? Because this is not my typical MO to come on here and be like, it's amazing. But I just let him cook. Like, let's see what he's got. Give him a couple seasons. I'm pretty excited about it right now.
Yeah. I mean, it's been a minute since you felt good about a Patriots draft.
Oh, I usually have to fucking get on here and be like, yeah, so Cole Strange, or like I love Kyle Duggar. I'm not trying to diss Kyle Duggar, but like when they draft like a guy out of Lenore Ryan, and it ended up being a really good pick, but it's like you come on the next day and you're just like, Kyle Duggar, Sony Michel in front of Lamar Jackson, N'Keal Harry instead of AJ Brown and Deebo Samuel.
It's like you get one Kyle Duggar, right? You get to take one of those shots. They can't all be those shots.
Razai Dowling. The N'Keal Harry one sticks in my craw so much because I knew it that AJ Brown was the guy. I was like, we need AJ Brown. This is my guy. And so we're staying positive though. I love it. Woo. We're happy about the Lions. We're happy about the Pats. But that is it for us. As always, Fouled Out can be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Cast, Overcast, anywhere you get your podcasts. You can hit us up on Gmail, fouledoutsports@gmail.com. We really appreciate you guys listening. We would love to hear from you. And you can find our videos on TikTok at Fouled Out Sports Podcast. It's a long name, but you can't miss it. This podcast is coming out on Tuesday, April 30th. I believe next week we'll be back to our regular recording schedule. So the next podcast is probably coming out May 9th, would be Thursday. There might watch for a Fouled Out podcast this weekend. There might be one. There might be some recording done on Friday night. But we'll see.
He needs to release some tension.
Yeah. Well, I'm so excited about the Pats at this point, and I've been so negative about them this offseason that I want to talk about that. But then also, like, by the time we get into NBA playoffs, which is what we're going to be talking about next week, some things that I want to talk about may have passed too far for them to be like super relevant.
Yeah.
So I might want to talk about some of that stuff because I have so many thoughts on the NBA playoffs so far. So potentially watch for that. No promises. But for now, Matt, good draft. I had a lot of fun watching it with you over the weekend.
Yeah.
It was super cool. We got to watch like multiple nights of it together. So we might have to make that a thing. But
yeah, I think that's the play going forward.
Yeah.
So.
But all right, my friend, I will see you soon.
Yep. Take care. Bye, guys.
Bye, guys. Bye, Mom.
Bye, Robin.